Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a very new and special episode of the League of Myths series. This episode will be focusing on Callista. So as usual, if you did enjoy this one, please do not forget to throw in a like. And a quick special shout out to my amazing Photoshop skills. But without further ado, let's go into the first myth. This myth will be asking, is it possible to combo Blitz's hook with Callista's ultimate? So this one is quite simple, and if you don't know, a long time ago you used to be able to use your pull and flash backwards with Blitz and pull them all the way to that location. But that is no longer possible, but now with Callista's ultimate, that makes it almost the same thing. So the short answer is that yes, Blitz's pull will interact with Callista's ultimate. This second myth of this episode, how does Callista's Black Spear interact with champions without any death animations? So there are a number of champions that don't actually have a death animation because they actually die within their passive ability. So for instance, Karthus. So this myth is asking, how did they look like if they were to die in their regular state, not in their passive state? And the answer for Karthus is quite odd, as he's somewhat in a weird state where he doesn't even look like he's dead. But enough of Karthus, let's see what happens with Zyra, since her passive does make her into a plant where she can finally shoot one last shot before she dies as a plant. So let's see if she has any death animation. As I'm forming the bomb, you're gonna see that she actually dies in the same way that she would have while she's turning into a plant, but this time she actually disappears for a few seconds, in the time of which she would have transformed into a plant. And then finally we have Kog'Maw, which in my opinion is not as weird as the other two. So once again, like the other two examples, I am forming my bond with Kog'Maw, and let's see what his death animation looks like. And it looks like he dies much like he would have died in his passive state. The animation is about the same. So Kog'Maw seems to be the only one that doesn't look too weird. The third myth of the series, what happens if Callista dies while having an ally ulted? So as I'm sure most of you are aware, whenever Callista ulties the target that she is soulbound with, that target more or less becomes a part of Callista. But as I die from Riven, my soulbound target is still able to fire himself off in any direction he or she chooses. But we decided to test out what if the target does not choose to fire off wherever he chooses, and the ultimate just automatically fires him out. Will the interaction be any different? But the answer is no. The next myth on this episode is asking, how does her ultimate work with either Fizz's, Nunu's, or Fiddlestick's ultimate? So for the Fizz testing part, the Fizz has to be on the enemy team, and we're testing to see how Callista's ultimate interacts with Fizz's ultimate, since the first part of his ultimate has that fish kind of on the ground for a bit. As he fires the ultimate on Warwick and I pull the Warwick towards me, the ultimate actually follows the Warwick, but only I took damage, not the Warwick, since by the time the shark came out, Warwick was no longer targetable. So that was cool and all, but what if this time Warwick actually fires out from my ultimate? Will the shark then still follow him? And as it does happen, the shark does follow the Warwick even after he was within me, and it does damage to him, but not to me because I was out of range. Next, we will test how Callista's ultimate interacts with allied champions that have a channel type ability. So in this case with Nunu, an interaction is actually quite interesting because as Nunu channels his ultimate, I use my ultimate at the beginning of his channel, but my ultimate actually waits for Nunu to finish channeling his before pulling him in me, which is actually quite an interesting interaction. But here is another interesting interaction, but this time with Fiddlesticks. As he's preparing to use his ultimate, I use mine as well, but this time it also waits for him to finish his channel. And as he goes within me, the ultimate stops for a mere second, but then it continues going as he comes out, almost as if it actually never stopped. So with that being said, it kind of got us thinking, what if Fiddlesticks doesn't fire himself out and stays within me? So we test that, and you can see I can walk around with a ghost of Fiddlesticks, and his ultimate seems to be working the whole time, which is actually pretty sweet. The next myth is asking, if Callista teleports while having a champion ultied, will they follow her? So this one is quite simple. Since a target pretty much becomes one with Callista, can she take them across the map if she goes there as well within the time frame? And since teleport takes 3.5 seconds to teleport to a certain area, and her ultimate has a 4-second duration at which the person can stay within Callista, it technically should work. So here we are channeling it as I pull in the Darius, and as I teleport down, the Darius finally comes out after the time limit is finished. But the cool thing is, he does follow me all the way down to the bottom lane. So the short answer is that yes, she can teleport with targets. And the final myth of this episode, what if Callista ults Thresh as someone uses his lantern, or vice versa? This is a very simple myth as well, but also quite interesting. In this case, as the Hecarim takes the Thresh lantern, I want to pull in the Thresh, and the Hecarim seems to also follow. But keep in mind, we notice that the timing on this has to be nearly perfect. But what if we switch it around, and I use my ultimate on a target taking Thresh's lantern, and as you saw there, the Fiddlesticks gets cancelled with the Thresh lantern and teleports to me instead. Alright guys, that does mark the end of this episode of the League of Myths series featuring Callista. If you did enjoy, please do not forget to throw in a like and share it with your friends. I will probably make a few more episodes featuring Callista because I got quite a lot of interesting submissions, and covering them all in one video will just take too long. But you can also write down any myths that you want me to test, whether it's to do with Callista or not, and maybe I'll put you in the next video. But as usual, I hope you guys enjoyed it and hope to see you next time. Peace.